Welcome to Baker Briefing, where we make news make sense. I'm Michael Emerson, the Harry and Hazel Chavon Fellow in Religion and Public Policy at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy here in Houston, Texas. And I am your guest host for this episode. Today we are talking about artificial intelligence, AI, and the many ways it's reshaping higher education, what it means for the future of intellectual development, academic curiosity, and critical thinking on college and university campuses. I am delighted to be joined by three amazing guests from both Rice University and the University of Houston. Amy Dittmar, who is Rice's Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, as well as a scholar of corporate finance, governance, and gender economics. Jeffrey Morgan is University of Houston's Associate Provost for Education, Innovation, and Technology, as well as its former Department Chair of Mathematics and co-director of the Teach Houston STEM Teacher Training Program. And our own Burke Nixon, who has been a core lecturer in Rice's program in writing and communication for over 10 years, and who's teaching a first-year writing course this semester called How to Be Human on the Virtues of the Personal Essay. We're delighted to have them on the podcast today to talk about these potentially existential shifts in the landscape of higher education. So let's start by focusing on AI's impact in the classroom, and we'll set the stage. Provost Dittmar, I'm going to ask if you might start us. What is AI? What kind of tools or technologies are we describing when we use that term?
Yeah, so I'm going to explain this in the simplest of terms because as you went through the bios, notice that none of my expertise had to do with AI or math like my colleague next to me. So, AI in its simplest form it's a machine algorithm or just a machine set of instructions that's going to receive some input. It's going to interpret them really through statistics and patterns, and then it's going to give you back some kind of a human-like interaction, some information back. So we think ChatGPT is probably the thing we know the most, and so it's looking at the words, it's looking at the language, it's looking for patterns, and it's trying to find through statistics kind of similar patterns. So when you say what is AI, and that's been around for 75 years, just not in the way that we know it. Now, if you ask anyone on the street, what is AI, they're going to really kind of think about it more in the last couple of years. And these are the tools that we're using. This is ChatGPT. We were just comparing notes on Notebook LM, and we could go on and list several others. And each of those just have different ways. You could think of them as different ways of thinking, in some senses, different ways of doing those pattern recognitions.
Yeah, thank you. So let's follow up just a bit. So Jeffrey Morgan, Associate Provost at the University of Houston, you were mentioning, as Provost Dittmar did, that it's been around for a while. It's not just ChatGPT or something. You tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, the first paper actually came out in the 1950s, and it was actually had a title. I don't remember the exact title, but artificial intelligence was in the title of that paper. And research has been ongoing since that time. You probably remember when finally, not that many years ago, computers crushed people in chess. And then eventually in Go, which was something that no one ever thought was possible. Artificial intelligence was involved in all of that. It's just that this remarkable thing happened with this idea of large language models a few years ago, and that's what really brought it to the public eye, because all of a sudden, artificial intelligence or machine learning or multivariable statistics, whatever you want to call it, came available to the general public. You didn't have to have this broad mathematical knowledge anymore to utilize a tool tied to artificial intelligence. All you had to do is talk to it.
So Burke Nixon, let me ask you, as you're in the classroom, since it's become more mainstream, have you seen any changes, positive or negative, in how students are engaging with it or involved in the classroom itself?
In the actual classroom, I think students are just, and my students at least, I can't speak for all teachers and all classes, but my students are still really engaged, and the actual classroom experience I think hasn't changed that much. They're not relying on AI during the classroom, but I've definitely seen a change in the writing that they're submitting. I remember when ChatGPT first came out, and I was like, many of these students may not even know about it, and everyone definitely knows about it now. It's changed some of the kind of writing that they submit. There's a kind of fluent, bland, algorithmically perfect writing that I used to not get.
Can you identify when it is AI?
Not always. Some of my students are in the crowd. I definitely can't always. I think one hard thing for teachers is it creates this kind of suspicion, and you can't tell for sure. Sometimes you could tell if it's an invented quotation that wasn't in the text you're reading. Human beings don't tend to invent Shakespeare quotes, but sometimes you just can't tell. And it's, sometimes it's a nice piece of writing and you're not sure, and you don't want to be a police officer. You don't want to be the AI cop. So I think it's important to emphasize process. You're working with the students on the process. You're meeting with them about their ideas so that, this isn't just a one-time thing that they produce, and then you can kind of trust it.
So a few years back, you published a piece in the Houston Chronicle where you said that AI has not killed the college essay. Do you still feel that way?
When I was writing that op-ed, it was, right after ChatGPT, like they were talking about right after it became really popular. And I was saying, there's this thing called ChatGPT. I was saying that in the Chronicle. And now I look at what I wrote and it seems like, man, it's crazy how fast technology changes, where I'm like trying to tell my audience what ChatGPT is. I don't think it's killed college writing, but of course I would say that because I'm a college writing teacher. But I think it's made it much more complicated. And I also think something good that's happened is it maybe makes college writing teachers focus more on, like I said, process, focus more on students having an individual voice, saying something surprising, saying something relevant to them. So maybe it can inspire teachers sometimes to make the work more meaningful and more valuable for them in a way that they're going to want to, have ownership over their own writing.
So let me follow up on that. Yeah, for anybody on the panel, do you think AI technologies serve as a tool to boost student creativity or to just like overly homogenize the thinking?
I think anything used in the wrong way can destroy critical thinking. And part of the problem now is that this is so fresh and new, and people really haven't, at least most people haven't learned how to use this tool in a way that can really increase their ability to think creatively. So it's like anything else. I'm old enough to remember when the internet started. It wasn't Al Gore, but when the internet started, I remember it was crazy at the time. People were saying, yeah, this is kind of cool, but how's anybody ever going to make any money off of this, right? But the trajectory on artificial intelligence is so much faster. When we first got the buzz on ChatGPT, we took a lot of the electronic assessment at the University of Houston, and we started running them through all the different AI models to see how these different tools would do on these assessments. And I think that spring, right after the release, the highest score we got on anything was like 38%. Last February, and first and second year courses, virtually 100% on everything.
And tell us a little bit about what does that mean? What are you testing there?
So what we're doing is we're taking these large question banks, when people teach classes, and I still teach a class every semester, but if you teach classes and you've got these large question banks that you're using to assess students on a regular basis. So this is in addition to any kind of written work you have students do. It gives them a gut check. Right, so every week they might have a few of these type of quizzes with many questions in it. A class where these models seems to have the most trouble or your math-related classes, remarkably enough. And so one particular set that we used was a 5,000 question set out of Calculus 1. And we fed this to every single thing out there, not with the answers, but the questions. And then, it gave us the feedback. We wrote code for this and used tokens and got the feedback. And it was remarkable to see the performance change over time and improve over time. And the thing I say to people on a regular basis is whatever AI is right now, it's as stupid as it's ever going to be. It's becoming more and more sophisticated.
Yeah, almost every day. I recently ran into an interesting limitation. I was designing a survey and I wanted visuals. We wanted to know what's the size of wherever you attend worship, how many people are there. And we wanted to give them visuals. Here's what it looks like if there's 20 people or 40 people. So we asked various AI programs, can you produce for us a visual like that? And the answer was every time it tried, but it never. So we said, do 50 people, and it would do 28. And I'd write back and say, that's not 50. Would you like me to try again? Yes. But it couldn't do 50, and then it would apologize.
It's remarkably awful at counting.
It's a amazing thing.
It's very polite though when it gets things wrong. You're so right. Yes. That is not 50.
It's like the GPS in your car, it does say rerouting. It doesn't say, why'd you go that way? Just rerouting. It's so kind.
Exactly. But yeah, I'm sure it'll soon solve that problem, but still limitations. Let's switch a little bit to the institutional level then for higher ed when we're thinking about AI. What should the role of universities be in regulating the use of AI, if any? What kind of policies do Rice and University of Houston have?
So I think there's kind of two levels. I mean, I think at my level of administration, I don't think there should be a lot of policies. I think it really should be down at the faculty level. And because how it's going to be used, it really comes down to helping the students learn, critically think, and what are the learning outcomes. And so what that's going to be done in one class versus the other are going to be really, really different. And that's the way we've approached it. So we have a guide to, you need to be clear with your students, though. It needs to be on your syllabus when you can and can't use, have that clarity. But, we're also encouraging faculty to learn how to use it to push that forward. I mean, as you were kind of saying examples, okay, probably not the test bank questions anymore. That's not going to really, but that doesn't change the learning outcomes that you were trying to get them to. And so the faculty is the best to know that. Now we have to teach the faculty how to use these tools as well. And that's something we just stood up, was a series of things to kind of help train the faculty and help make sure that they're literate and fluent even in this so that they can do it.
As I was mentioning just before we began this recording, Rice folks received a message saying a bold new AI initiative is coming. Is there anything you would comment on that?
Yeah, well, that was what I was just referring to. I'm not sure about the word bold. I mean, but it's, at least trying to run as fast as AI can move. But I mean, we have found that our students are using it, but we need our professors to be using it as well. I mean, we need to be using it so that we can use it as a tool in the classroom. And so what we've launched are a series of different things, everything from an online course for the faculty they're all enrolled to kind of learn how to use it, to funding for grants for either small experiments in classrooms or totally overhauling or creating new classrooms, as well as creating communities within schools to get faculty talking to faculty about how they're using it. Because we really have to empower our faculty to help our students know how to use this as a tool, because they have to. The world is changing. I mean, I think that they're going to have to go out to jobs and to life and know how to navigate. So. Yeah.
And how about at the University of Houston?
We have a similar policy about AI in the classroom. It's completely up to the faculty members, and we do encourage them to make sure that they spell things out very clearly in their syllabus in terms of when students can and cannot use AI. Some courses they can't use it at all. In other classes, it's very liberal usage. In some classes, you have some assignments where you're allowed to use it, and others where you're not. As far as what we've done at the University of Houston or tried to do for faculty and students, we built courses that we put on Canvas, a different one for students than one we have for faculty. But those are available for everybody, where it's an introduction to AI. We've been funding AI initiatives in the classroom for the past 3 years now. We fund many grants out of the Provost office. We call these teaching innovation grants, and we fund a number of those every year for people to bring AI into the classroom. This fall, the initiative, we just sent out this email today to faculty letting them know that this fall's teaching innovation proposal is going to be one where people send us ideas that they'd like to implement to bring AI into the core courses. And we'll fund a number of those this fall. What we'd like to do is eventually have at least one course in each of the 9 core areas at the University of Houston that is utilizing AI in some way. Not because we think AI should be in every class, but I think that students are interested in this, and there might be a student who sees how this particular core class they're going to be utilizing AI in here. I think that's cool. I'd like to do that. Other students will be like, no, I don't want that at all. And we want to give them that choice. We've also run 2 conferences at the University of Houston on AI in education, and we'll have our 3rd one this February. So we're trying to make some headway. Like you were mentioning, we need to do a much better job training the faculty. I suspect that our students are much further out in front of this than our faculty are. It kind of reminds me of when we had the whole COVID thing back in 2020. And I can remember when we were moving very rapidly to bring things online. And then there were these questions from folks saying, gosh, do you think the students will be able to figure out how to do this online stuff? I said, look, it's the faculty members. Those are the ones that are going to need the help. Students are fearless.
Okay, how about it for admissions? So a lot of universities rely, for example, on the essay, and now you can have AI write that. Does that impact how admissions is done? Do we have to change what we require? Any thoughts on that?
So I actually don't think it's going to change dramatically, in part because an admissions essay doesn't usually get you in, and if you're doing a holistic admissions, because you've written it really well or you've picked the exact right topic. And the students, the 17-year-olds out there don't always realize that, but it's not. It's really about showing something about yourself that you can't in other ways. And I guess I'm not convinced AI can do that. I mean, as an example, my daughter's college roommate, they were at a top Ivy League school, so obviously a good essay. It was on going Black Friday shopping with her aunt. I don't think it was about the topic. It was about what they told about herself, and I didn't read it, so I don't know, but I think that's still going to hold. And I think if there are worries, there's things you can do. I mean, there are schools that do video essays that you could certainly do. I mean, I'm sure you could probably get AI to manufacture your face. But, at least right now, I think we can all still tell the difference in pictures that are AI and not. So I think there's ways to kind of keep up with it. But really, it's that authentic content that at least right now, we haven't been able to recreate.
I love that idea because, the writer is still the best expert on themselves, and they're trying to tell a story about themselves. AI is not going to ever be the best expert on their experience. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And the other thing I would say is there's an idea that this K-12 educator talks about, expertise begins with noticing. And, any expert in any field, like one thing they're good at is noticing stuff that the non-expert can notice. And I still think, if you get ChatGPT to write your admissions essay, you still need the skills of being able to notice if this is a good essay, if it feels authentic, if it's compelling. So that's still where the students need to learn how to notice what good writing is.
Yeah. As well as, our Associate Vice Provost for Digital Learning comments that actually writing the prompts themselves are actually a form of critical thinking and to get it. So, the whole process, we just have to rethink how we're testing or how we're, evaluating people in these processes.
So maybe that's a precursor then to this follow-up question, which is, do you have any concern about unequal access to AI as students are either applying or once they arrive in university?
I don't have as much concern as I used to. And part of the reason for that is that, Google stepped forward this past spring and said, hey, every student can have free access to the Gemini professional version, free of charge for the next year. Of course, they offered them all sorts of other, goodies in the gift bag to go with that. I'd like to think that Google did that because they're just nice guys, but I'm sure there's a business angle somewhere in that. But that did level the playing field a little bit because the Google Gemini product, a nice product, it really is, gives them access to all sorts of things, including Notebook LM that was mentioned earlier. That did level the playing field a little bit. I would be more concerned if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and I think for admissions specifically, because if that's where you're still thinking of the question, we've kind of been dealing with that since the beginning of admissions, right? Different access to AP courses, IB courses, different preparations for SAT. Any good admissions team has to be able to kind of sort out what access you had to certain learning sets or tools and where you are. And so I think they do as well. So more work for them, I guess, but yeah.
Like we mentioned before, having skills in AI, being able to use AI is going to set some students apart, but also maybe being able to communicate well without relying on AI too much as a crutch is going to also set students apart. So one equity issue might be, have students been given the access to write without AI? Have they been able to do it without it? So I think that could be an interesting possibility.
Let's transition to the final area of topic, which is even bigger yet than the institutions, which is focusing on the workforce and university's role in preparing people for that, and then society at large. So in this age of artificial intelligence, and we know it will only become ever more present, how do we ensure that students develop robust critical thinking skills that they're going to need to be responsible citizens?
Well, I think some of that we've already been talking about, and that is kind of the learning outcomes and how you use it in the classroom, and so that they are still being able to develop the critical thinking skills. Even though we don't want to be the police, we kind of have to have some way to know if they're using it and not thinking. But I actually would go farther than just the critical thinking skills. How do we actually make sure that they also know how to use these tools as a part of that critical thinking, as a part of that? Because if part of the reason you come to college is to launch yourself into a career or further your education, that's going to be expected. And so, as much as I think it's great to have the choice, as you were talking about the foundation, I actually think that we don't have students exposed to the AI and how to use it within that critical thinking process before they leave. We aren't doing them a good service.
I agree with that, but I also think the soft skills have always been so important, and they'll continue to be important. When a company hires someone, It's not the same, but it's a little bit like marrying somebody. And you bring somebody into a company and they're working in a team. If they don't have soft skills, no one's going to want to work with that person, right? They're not going to partner with them on projects, and it'll be detrimental to your business. So the soft skills are always going to be important. Critical thinking is always going to be important. AI isn't going to take this stuff away. It's just going to be another tool. People were alarmed when all of a sudden every student had a calculator in their hand. People weren't alarmed when all of a sudden everybody had access to the internet. These are all just tools. People aren't going to be replaced. There might be some jobs that get nicked a little bit, but other jobs will come along, and soft skills are going to be very important along with critical thinking.
Just to follow up on that idea of soft skills, I think one thing I've seen in my classroom is now there's a gap sometimes between a student's ability to express themselves and writing using, with aids like ChatGPT, and then how they can express themselves in person. And so I think interpersonal communication skills are going to be they're always important, and they're going to continue to be more important.
So a concern that you hear from a lot of folks, and we see it a lot in writing, and you've kind of hinted at this, but I'd like you to address it directly. People worry that AI will simply replace all kinds of jobs. So we'll always need plumbers and electricians, we think, but we may not need mathematicians. We may not need computer scientists. Who knows? What are your thoughts on this?
I think certainly it's going to replace some jobs, and other technologies have replaced other jobs. It was before my time, but I remember hearing stories that, to run a regression, to do your research, you had 3 grad students go out and do the math, and they came back with the same answer. You had your answer. And so, we've moved forward from that. And so some of these jobs will be replaced, but there will be others, I think, as you were saying, that come along. What that means, though, is a lot of retooling, right? A lot of re-education. I mean, we talk about the continual education, and it becomes even that much more important. So going back to your earlier question on critical thinking, we've got to prepare the students not to go out into the current workforce, but to be able to adapt. So the adaptability, I think, is probably one of the most important things that we can help them with.
All right, we're going to ask the final question. This is for all of you. Overall, are you an AI optimist or an AI pessimist? And then what concerns you or excites you the most about AI in general?
I'm both an optimist and a pessimist, I guess. If that's cheating, I don't know if I'm allowed to take both answers. On one hand, I think that everything we were saying about critical thinking is right. And I don't think that AI is going to prevent students from being able to think critically. That's still going to be our job in the classroom. And it's not like we had a golden age of American critical thinking for the last 200 years, and now suddenly it's stopping. Critical thinking is always a hard thing to teach and to learn. So I'm not so pessimistic about that. But I do worry that sometimes people are going to take their individual voice and using writing as a way to think, and sometimes outsource that to AI. And I hope that doesn't happen, because I think there's still value in wrestling with language, wrestling with your own thoughts without kind of shortcutting it.
I agree with that. Although I can see plenty of horrific things that could happen through AI, I am an eternal optimist when it comes to this. And one thing that I really like is that it's forced us to get outside of our comfort zone. Faculty members for a lot of years have been doing exactly the same thing, and now they're having to rethink how they're doing things. And I think that this is going to give rise to an improved education, and that will also in turn give rise to better learning outcomes, and hopefully eventually better critical thinking and soft skills. And there are going to be a lot of other things that come out of this, and I'll just throw one in here right now. Right now, assessment at universities is very static. Right? It's typically you give an assignment, or someone comes in and takes a test and there's 10 or 12 questions, and you go through the process of addressing these questions. I think that AI in the next 5 to 7 years is going to bring about personalized assessment, where a faculty member will sit down with artificial intelligence, devise some sort of testing tool through the use of ideas and a knowledge base. And then the AI will individually, every single student in a class, just be a conversation, an interview, and based upon students' answers to a question, the thing could go in a different direction. They could drill deeper. They can move on to another thing. I think it will completely change assessment. And again, I think this will lead to better learning outcomes. That'll certainly help with the soft skills. I'm very optimistic about it.
I would say the same. I might say I'm a realist, if that's a third option. I mean, I think it is coming, and there are some things that can be a little concerning about it. But I think that if we lean into what you were saying, I mean, that's very exciting to think about, kind of a continual learning. And because that can also mean the professor can pivot throughout the class. So I think that we have to do that, but we have to do it responsibly. And we have to do it in a way that we understand what the outcomes could be. And we all read different horror stories of people going it with AI in a negative way. But for every one of those, there's 5 more that I think are just amazing.
This has been Baker Briefing, where we make news make sense. The podcast is brought to you by Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy, which delivers nonpartisan policy research on the most pressing issues facing the U.S., Texas, and the world. Share your feedback and your guest or topic suggestions at bakerbriefing@rice.edu. This episode was produced by Karina Zemmel with the support from Maggie Saiganova. AV production was led by Kevin Young. Learn more about our work at bakerinstitute.org. And thank you for listening.